The scariest serial killers in history. Serial killers are among the most terrifying people imaginable, partially because of how unfathomable their crimes can be. Most serial killers kill randomly, looking for a specific type of victim in the dead of night, whether they're tall, blonde women or elderly black men. Any type of person can be prey to a certain type of serial killer. Many of these heinous evildoers have been known to rape and torture their victims. Some have even made meals out of their victims' dead bodies. One of the things that makes serial killers so scary is that anybody can be a victim and anybody can be the culprit. Many of the worst serial killers were friendly neighbors or easygoing coworkers that one would never suspect of secretly having human heads in the fridge. The serial killers on this list are among the scariest villains in history due to their methods, their motives, and their personalities. We had the list of 20 scariest serial killers in history. So let's get started. Number 20. Peter Curtin. On 1929, Curtin initiated an unknown number of attempted assaults. This included reportedly stabbing a 45-year-old mechanic 20 times and murdering and sexually assaulting at least 6 women and young girls. Before this series of crimes, he had a lifelong history which included arson, burglary, sexual fetishism, and murder stemming from childhood. On 1930, Curtin attempted to rape and kill a woman named Maria Butleys. But she managed to escape, which led to his capture on May 24. On 1931, he was executed by guillotine. His last words were, "Tell me after my head is chopped off, will I still be able to hear, at least for a moment, the sound of my own blood gushing from the stump of my neck? That would be the pleasure to end all pleasures." Very disturbing, right? Number 19. Robert Pickton. Robert Pickton killed anywhere between 6 and 49 victims. The Canadian serial killer lured prostitutes and drug-addled women to his pig farm to kill them. He'd then cut up their bodies and feed them to his pigs. He kept some of his victims' heads, hands, and feet in refrigerators while bringing some human remains, mixed with pig intestines, to a rendering plant to be made into products like makeup and soap. He was caught in 2002 and sentenced to life in prison. Number 18. Fred West. Frederick Walter Stephen or Fred West, he was an English serial killer. Between 1967 and 1987, West, alone and later with his second wife, also serial killer named Rosemary West, tortured and raped numerous young women and girls, murdering at least 12, including their own family members. Fred killed at least 2 people before collaborating with Rose, while Rose murdered Fred's stepdaughter, his first wife's biological daughter, when he was in prison for theft. The majority of the murders occurred between May 1973 and August 1979 in their homes at the city of Gloucester, with many bodies buried at or near these homes. Number 17. Joaquim Kroll. Joaquim Kroll killed and ate his victims from 1955 to 1976. He killed a total of 14 people, including young children. He'd strangle his victims before having sex with their dead bodies. Then he'd take pieces home to eat later. Kroll was only caught when a neighbor complained about backed-up plumbing. When the police investigated the pipes, Kroll admitted they were backed up with guts. He was sentenced to life in prison but died of a heart attack in 1991. Number 16. Leonard Lake. Leonard Lake and his partner Charles Ng killed between 11 and 25 people during 1983 to 1985. He brought his victims to his cabin's custom dungeon to torture, rape, and kill. He videotaped many of his victims' last torturous moments. After Lake was arrested on a firearms charge, he killed himself with a cyanide pill. That's when the police discovered his dungeon of horrors. Number 15. H. Holmes. Herman Webster Mudgett, better known as Dr. Henry Howard Holmes, or more commonly as H. Holmes, was an American serial killer. While he confessed to 27 murders, only 9 could be plausibly confirmed, and several of the people he claimed to have murdered were still alive. He is said to have killed as many as 200, though this figure is only traceable to 1940s pulp magazines. Number 14. Gary Ridgway. Most famously known as the Green River Killer, Gary Ridgway strangled over 70 women throughout the 1980s and 90s and tossed many of the bodies in the Green River. Ridgway chose prostitutes and runaways as his victims, luring them away by showing a picture of his son. He was finally caught in 2001 after many years of terrorizing the women of Washington. He was sentenced to life in prison. Number 13. Vlad the Impaler. One of the most notorious serial killers in history, Vlad III Prince of Wallachia aka Vlad the Impaler or Vlad Tepes, was characterized during his lifetime as a sadistic tyrannical figure who pleasured in torturing and killing his 40,000 to 100,000 victims during his 1456 to 1462 reign. While his methods included feeding roasted children to the mothers and cut breasts of wives to their husbands, his preferred and best known method of execution was impaling victims' entire bodies on long wooden stakes. His reputation became so well known throughout Europe that 420 years after he died, his name and exploits became inspiration for the title character of Bram Stoker's novel Dracula. Number 12. Andrei Chikatilo. Over the span of 12 years in Russia, Andrei Chikatilo killed at least 52 women and children by stabbing. He was often called the Rostov Ripper and had been suspected of the crimes over the Decade of Terror, but he wasn't apprehended until 1990. Chikatilo was executed via firing squad in 1994. Number 11. Henry Lee Lucas. Over a period of 20 years, Henry Lee Lucas killed at least 350 people, although his number could be closer to 600. Among Lucas's victims was his own mother, a drifter, and an unidentified woman. Once Lucas was caught, he confessed to hundreds of murders but recanted on most confessions. He ultimately was convicted of 11 murders in 1983 and sentenced to death. His death sentence was commuted to life, but he died of heart failure in 2001. Before we will give you the next list, be sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell to see more videos like this. Since we are uploading 1 to 2 videos per week. So guys, let's continue. Number 10. Albert Fish. In the 1900s, Albert Fish kidnapped, raped, killed, and cannibalized young children. While only 3 victims were ever proven, he claimed to have killed many, many more. Fish was often known as the Gray Man, along with a few other nicknames. He was caught in 1934 and sentenced to death by electrocution. Number 9. Richard Ramirez. Richard Ramirez, aka the Night Stalker, terrorized the people of Los Angeles when he went on a year-long crime spree in which he broke into people's homes to rape and murder. He killed 13 people and injured more. He was sentenced to death but died of cancer in June 2013. Number 8. Jave Dickbull. Jave Dickbull killed more than 100 boys in Pakistan after sexually abusing them. He would kidnap his victims by luring them off the streets and drugging them. Many of his victims were dissolved in acid, which is why the authorities were not aware there was a serial killer on the loose. He sent a letter to the police confessing to the crimes, leading to the biggest manhunt in Pakistan history. He was arrested in 1999 and sentenced to death, but he killed himself before he could be executed. Number 7. Jeffrey Dahmer. Jeffrey Dahmer became one of the most famous serial killers in the US when he was caught for the murders of 17 young men who he raped, dismembered, and ate. Dahmer had been attempting to create a mindless sex slave by drilling a hole in the heads of his live victims. He was caught in 1994 and beaten to death in prison. Number 6. Jack the Ripper. Jack the Ripper earned the title as the world's scariest and most notorious serial killer for his mysterious and unforgiving nature. During the 1800s, he killed many English prostitutes by slitting their throats and opening their abdomens. He sometimes took body parts, including the uterus, as trophies. Nobody knows his true identity or what became of him. Number 5. Edmund Kemper. Edmund Emil Kemper III, also known as Big Ed, the Co-Ed Butcher, or the Co-Ed Killer, is an American serial killer and necrophile who was active in California in the early 1970s. He started his criminal life by murdering his grandparents when he was 15 years old and later killed and dismembered 6 female hitchhikers in the Santa Cruz area. He then murdered his mother and one of her friends before turning himself in to the authorities days later. Kemper is noted for his imposing size and high intelligence, standing 6 feet 9 inches tall and weighing over 300 pounds and having an IQ in the 140 range, attributes that left his victims with little chance to overcome him. Number 4. Edy Jain. Edy Jain famously inspired a plethora of the most horrifying Hollywood serial killers of all time, including Norman Bates, Jane Gum known as Buffalo Bill, and Leatherface from Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Although Jain only allegedly killed his brother and 2 local women, he was also known to dig up the dead bodies of women similar to his mother and use their skin to make a suit. He also used the body parts to make masks, bowls, lamps, and more. He was caught in 1957 but died in a mental hospital of respiratory failure in 1984. Number 3. John Wayne Gacy. When having a children's birthday party, you never imagine that the party clown could be anything more than an entertainer. But in John Wayne Gacy's case, he was a professional clown with a murderous streak. Gacy killed 33 young men and buried the bodies around his home after torturing and raping his victims. He was discovered and executed in 1994. Number 2. Ted Bundy. Between 1974 and 1978, Ted Bundy kidnapped and killed 30 women, although the actual number of victims is likely much higher. He tortured and raped his victims, sometimes even keeping their dismembered heads as keepsakes. He was caught in 1979 and sentenced to death by electric chair. Number 1. Pedro Lopez. Pedro Lopez raped and killed more than 300 girls throughout South America, receiving the name the Monster of the Andes. He originally killed 100 tribal women in Peru, but the police let him go to continue his murderous streak. He was arrested and convicted in 1980, but let go in 1998. That's all for today, guys. Thanks for watching. Hey, be sure to give a big thumbs up to this video and share it with your friends. Question of the day: who's the scariest serial killers in history? Leave a comment below.